Hey, welcome everyone to the ArchiCAD User Monthly Training Webinar for May 2022. This is first working thing that I'm doing after vacation. I just came back from the first vacation I've had since the pandemic. You know, we've done some long weekends, but we went to Hawaii, my wife and I, and spent 12 days there, 11 days. Really a good break, and got back a couple of nights ago. So hope you're all doing well wherever you are in the world. Let me know where you're calling in from. Go ahead and type into the questions area, say you know, your name and where you're calling in from, and we shall get going. Make sure, I just want to also make sure that you can hear me, see my screen, and see my webcam. So hey, Ian from Scotland, and Mackenzie from LA. Mackenzie was one of our presenters a couple of months ago. Randy from Australia. So we already, the very first three have Europe, California, and down under. All right, and Imad from Algeria, excellent. All right, and Oran from Middletown, Connecticut, and Gaston, where are you from? From the Caribbean, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. All right, and Rich Matthews from down under. Rich White from Ontario. Saxon, hey Saxon, old friend from Sacramento. All right, so thank you. Keep on, just putting that in there. I won't read everybody's name, but we shall get going. And if you are in the ArchiCAD coaching program and you want to use the Slack workspace, that's fine as well. All right, so we do have a few questions that were sent in. If you have other questions, if any of you on the call have a question that you'd like help on, just type it into the questions area. I'll do my best to fit in all the questions that I can during the next hour and a half to 2 hours that we're here together. A number of the questions actually seem to have to do with terrain modeling and levels. So I think this will be interesting because several people had somewhat related questions, so I can work them all together. Let us see here, but feel free to type in some new questions if you have something, or of course follow-up questions. Let's see. Now, is Mark Bratt on? His question was a little different, so if we are able to group them, then if I can take care of Mark. You are on, so I'm going to open up your microphone. Mark, your line is open.
All righty.
Hey, so you had a question about doing walls that are multiple story, multiple floor mezzanine walls, and being able to show the windows and be editable on each specific floor plan. So you sent some PDFs here, and then you sent the file. Now, I believe I got the file. What version of ArchiCAD are you in?
21 or 25.
25. Okay, perfect. All right, so I have 25 open, and we'll go. I downloaded your file, and go say BC Frozen Foods here. All right. So first of all, when you have walls that span multiple stories, which is certainly common that you either have a single wall or it's built all at once, or it's stacked and sort of appears like a common skin of the cladding. You do have two main choices. You can break it up into multiple levels. In other words, a very typical thing would be a wall on each story. And ArchiCAD will take away the lines in between when it recognizes that the planes are identical, that in other words, if the walls are exactly in the same plane and space, and that they have the same surface material or surface appearance, and it'll say, well, there's no reason to put a line there because they're stacked and they are the same surface. You also have the possibility of creating walls that are 2, 3, or multiple stories in height. When you do that, you need to designate the wall as being visible on all relevant stories, so that way it automatically says, oh, it goes up 30 feet, it's shown on stories 1, 2, 3, but it doesn't go into story 4. You know, that would be a typical thing. And when you do it that way, ArchiCAD will take command of how it displays things on each story. So there's a little less flexibility, but it is very powerful because essentially you have one integrated element. And if you did change the wall type or its surface or any other attributes, and if you were to move windows, for example, in a stairwell down to split, you know, be potentially on 2 stories in the middle of the stairwell, it will actually take care of that pretty gracefully. So let's just see, we have here, let's see. Oh, interesting. I went to fit the visible elements in the window, and this got smaller. There must be something off to the side here. I'm just gonna do this here. It's interesting why, I don't know why it's it made space there, but I'll just zoom in on the working area and we'll take a look at, since this was what was open when we opened the file, I can see here the multiple levels of windows. And are these doors like for trucks to access?
Yes.
Okay, all right. All right, so now if I go to the south elevation and I say open the source view here, now if I select this, we can see that this is a wall, that's another wall, that's another wall. So that's the stacked versions of them. And if we were to go to, I guess, the first floor plan here, and we look, okay, so here are all the doors and, you know, on the left side there. Now, if I were to select this wall, zoom in a little bit, so select the wall. Of course, this wall goes from 0 to 12 feet, so it's just 1 story. And you've got the top not linked, which means you're manually setting the height, which is fine. The only real reason to link, you know, to another story is if you might want to adjust the heights of the stories, and then it'll automatically shorten or lengthen the heights of the walls in relationship to the storylines. Now, let's just take this particular wall, and I'm just going to drag a copy of it down here. Now, why am I going to do that? And let me just take it a little further. So take that, drag this down here. And let's see, where is your elevation marker? Here's your elevation marker. So this wall is exactly in front of the other one. And given that it was 12 feet, I'm going to make this wall, let's say, I'll just make it 36 feet, so it's 3 times as tall. Now, what will happen here if we go to that elevation? So I'm guessing that that's the elevation we were looking at, or was it the south elevation? Here it is, the south elevation.
Yeah.
So what we're going to see is that now this lower wall, of course, is sticking up here, and we're no longer seeing those windows, you know, on there. Now, if I go up to the next story here, we can see, now this is schematic plans. Now, why are we not seeing any windows on this one?
Just, you know, just on the second story, they're only to your right a little bit in that area. Yeah. Just in the caretakers.
There we go. Okay. All right. So you've got the wall being solid black, and the window is shown. We can see the cutout, but it's not as clear just because of, I don't know if that's your graphic override there that's making it the solid black. Let me just see. So this would be, let me just change it from schematic plans to no overrides. There we go. Okay. So at least temporarily, I'm just allowing me to see, you know, the details of the wall a little bit more clearly. Now, if I drop this window here, we can see that this window is set to be header to the story, 7 foot 11 3/4. So that basically, if I were to drop it into this wall here, it should be the same elevation because it's based on the story, as opposed to having the window set based on the base of the wall. So by having it set the way you did, I can actually use the same information because it's relative to a reference level rather than relative to the wall. Now let me just take this and I'll just drag it left or right and I'll snap it to there. So now it is precisely in line, with that window. Now let's go back to that elevation here. And we can see there's that window. Now, of course, we can put in all of them as we need to. Now, this wall here is the wall that's based on the first floor. It's going up, several stories in height. And if we look at the way that it's being represented on the floor plan, it is set to be all relevant stories. So now if we had set this to be home story only, what's going to happen? It's going to disappear. It'll only be seen on an unseen story, in this case, the lower story. So I'll just say continue, and you can see that wall disappears. If I go down to the first floor, we can see it's there, but it's only being seen there. So I'm going to go and I can either undo or I'll just demonstrate for clarity's sake. The floor plan will say, hey, I want it to be shown not just on the home story with a cut through at the projected level here, but I'll make it all relevant stories. Now, when I do that, before I do that, I'm going to point out that we have multiple choices here when we're having a wall only visible on one story. But when we switch it to all relevant stories, then this gets fewer choices. We cannot do symbolic cut. So symbolic cut would say, hey, draw the wall as if you're cutting through it, put windows and doors as if you're cutting through them, regardless of their elevation and space. So when you do all relevant stories, it says, well, I really have to do something where I cut through the wall at each story at a cutting plane. And then we have some options whether it's going to show above and below the cutting plane or not. Anyway, so this is now back to where we will see it when I go up to the next floor, and you can just barely see the window just because we've got that graphic override again. But let's go up to the third floor, and it is again seen there. Now, are there windows there, or is it on the roof plan that you see the windows?
No, it's on that third floor.
It's on that third floor, and just
there's windows. There should be windows in that wall.
well, let's just what I'm going to do is we'll just go back to that elevation here, and I'm going to temporarily change this wall height. So I'll say change the height down, and I'll take it down here. So yeah, there are all of these windows. Why are we not seeing them on the plan? Very obviously there. Now, by the way, since I took this down to, it snapped, I think, to the story level, that wall may temporarily disappear from view because it's no longer relevant there. I can bring it back up, but let's see, where are the windows? Don't seem to be showing very well. So let me turn off the graphic override. Here, no overrides. And we're not seeing the window there. Now, are there two walls? Is it possible that there's a wall without windows stacked on top of a wall with windows?
That could be.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this wall down, let's say 3 feet for the heck of it. And we can see that there is another set of lines here. So this is another wall. So I don't see windows in either one. Let me just drag this one down, say 6 feet. And there's yet another one, but notice that there's this sort of white area.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that is. Is that where the windows are? I mean, we're not seeing the windows. Let's just go, let's see here. This is, we'll say all visible and unlocked. Okay, so that's showing some other things. We'll just go to floor plans. So why are we not seeing this? Let me just say this. That's a grid element. That's a slab. And okay, so we don't we don't actually have anything left in here. So these were the two walls that were stacked. Why aren't we seeing the windows? Well, let's just see if potentially the floor plan cut plane is set in an odd level. So we go to floor plan cut plane, and right now, and it says it's 4 feet above there. Let's go to the wall. The wall here is saying all relevant stories projected. Okay, what about this one? This is projected with overhead. So why are we not seeing the windows or doors? So this, it looks like there is something selectable there. It is a window.
If you scroll to the left, I think the windows off to the left side of that story are visible. But why they're not? Yeah, so those windows off. Yeah, those windows are visible.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to that elevation and say what's going on. Remember, I lowered this extra wall here, and this does appear to be one wall with the same windows there.
Yeah.
So what is going on with it? Now, your main question was, how do you have walls that what do you call it, can span multiple stories and show windows and doors correctly? And the answer was simply make it as tall as it needs to be, set it up to show not just on the home story, but on all relevant stories, and then you'll see it there, and use one of the, of course, you'll have then one of the projected options, which will cut through and show, you know,
yes,
the correct things.
yes.
So I've answered your original question. I don't know what's going on with, you know, why, you know, this window on the plan. Now it says that the header to story 3 is 8'6", and the window is 4 feet in height. So the window is actually above the cutting plane. That's why we're not seeing it. So in other words, it goes from 4'6" to 8'6", and the cutting plane is at 4 feet. So let's just verify that. If I go back here, and let me just go to the sort of the standard view of it. You know, here we can see these windows are showing. So maybe these windows are actually a little lower or something. Is that possible?
They're not supposed to be, but they could be.
Yeah, let's just see. So this window here, no, it's 4 foot, 4 feet, and this, it's one wall. So, but let's just change the cutting plane temporarily. So I'll go to the floor plan cut plane and say that I want to make this up at, you know, 5 feet. And now all of those windows do show. Now, obviously you have good design reasons, I'm assuming, for these windows to be up higher than usual and not go down to the 4 foot level. When you want to show them on the plan, what we would do is just, if I double click here, you'll see they go away because it's using the settings for this particular view, which has a floor plan cut plane setting already built in. So if we wanted this particular view to correctly show this, then we might change it to 5 feet or some value above the bottom of the window here. So I'll just change it for this particular view. You see now these windows show up. Now if I go and I'll just drag these back into position. So this is the 3 feet there, and this is the 6 feet. So now these are all back in line. Of course, the elevation really shouldn't change because I just moved them. Interesting that oh, I guess probably the signage is a separate element. And so it was behind the wall, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if I take this wall back up, and well, we'd want to probably take it up at least to this height and then trim it by the roof.
Yep.
I'm guessing. So in fact, it is automatically being trimmed by the roof because of its relationship to it. And of course, we just want to pop in some windows. So on the 3rd floor, if I eyedrop, oh, so this, wall. Oh, I just have it down a little further. So let's just zoom in enough that we can see this, and I'll just pop in a couple of the windows. So I'll eyedrop this window and I'll pop it in. Now I can't drag it down, unfortunately, drag a copy. So the simplest thing is just to pop it in. Now I don't know, left and right, sliders may need to be, paid attention to, but I'll just drag this over to there. And then here's an interesting option that not everybody knows about. While you can multiply and say, hey, I want to create 10 of these windows and they are spaced, so many feet apart or whatever. In this case, I don't even know whether they are uniformly spaced or not. So I'll just say drag multiple copies. And what that allows me to do is to say, I'll take this point and I'll line it up with that. Then I'll line it up with that. Then I'll line it up with that, line it up with that, etc. And when I'm done, I'll just hit the escape key. And I now have multiple copies of course, the same window spaced in relationship to these reference ones. So now we go back to the elevation, and of course we should, see these windows just like the original elevation. So that's the main things having to do with floor plan display on multiple stories, and then of course cut plane. We saw clearly an example where it was set in a way that was not working very well, and with a slight adjustment to the settings of the view, it then showed the windows the way we would expect. So does that answer your questions pretty much?
Yeah, yes, Eric, thank you very much. That answers my question quite well. The second question that I had was taking a 3-story wall like that, using that same one, I think is a good example, and just simply splitting it back down to 3 individual walls instead of the one.
Okay, so if you had already drawn it as multiple story wall, how could you split it into pieces?
Yes, and keeping all the windows and everything, of course, where they're at.
Right. All right, so here's a couple of things to be aware of. So if I'm going to go to a 3D view, because it'll be clearer then. We have this multiple story wall. So if I use the split command here, actually it doesn't let me do it that way. I'd have to say not trim, so split. Okay, if I have to do this on the floor plan to do what I'm going to demonstrate, if I select this and I use the split, I can draw, a line
vertical.
Here. Yeah. Now what that does is it looks. Oh, that's interesting that it added. Why is there? Why is the wall looking different there? Maybe undo this. Yeah, what happened there? That is a little odd. Okay, the wall is selected. I'm gonna split it. I'll just do it slightly different place. Leave it selected there. Okay, so that did, I don't know what was going on. Maybe it had to do with the window down on the story below. But what we've got now is 2 walls. So I select this. It's hard to see with the override, so I'm going to turn off the graphic override. And we have, the 2 walls, one here and one here. You can see 2 walls. So we can split something horizontally, along its reference line, and it'll look much the same. In other words, this looks like a continuous thing, but it actually is now 2 pieces. Now, that's not what you were asking about. You want to split it along, presumably the storyline, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
Unfortunately, there's no equivalent of splitting along a storyline.
Okay.
So what we can do, and I'll just take this piece, for example, because this actually has 3 sets of, openings, the original ones and then the ones up above. So I'm going to drag a copy of this. So I'm just using the drag a copy keyboard shortcut, and I'll just do 10 feet here. Now, this copy, and actually, let me do three copies here. So let me undo that. It might be easier to just multiply it. So I'll say multiply and increment and spread. So I'll say we'll take this along in a straight line, and I'll say 10 feet, and then another 10 and another 10. So now, and then I'm not going to make them go up or down. I'll keep them horizontal. All right, so I now have, in a moment, I'll have 3 copies. Now let's just take this one, and I will probably need to just delete these lower openings. Be interesting to see if we don't delete them. Actually, so maybe if I don't delete them, what happens? If I go and say take the bottom up, and it looks like there's a snap at the 3rd floor. That's interesting, and a snap at the 4th. I had never noticed this. This is an interesting little snap guide that it actually has a snap saying that's the reference level of the 3rd floor. Yeah. Of course, we could do it based on the height. Now, this is an odd one, 19 feet 6 and some fraction, but I'm assuming that that's the correct one. Now, what happened here is we have a wall that's only up on this story, but we have these windows and doors that are actually part of it that are orphaned. You know, you can have windows and doors outside of a wall. It's rather odd. You know, it's counterintuitive, and you might lose track of them. But in this case, I'll just delete them. All right, so what do I have? I have an upper wall. We can do a similar thing with this, say this one, and stretch it down to there, and stretch this up. Do we have second story? So now I have another piece of wall, you know, and I can get rid of these. So this is the way I would do it, is literally just drag multiple copies. You know, for convenience, do it in 3D, you know, so you can see this. And let's just do this one here, and I'll take it down, the height down to here. Now, I don't know if I got this perfectly correct, but we'll get rid of the, you know, the upper windows, and well, I'll get rid of these things. Now, so at this point, if I were to drag this over to there, and this over, drag it here. So this wall, you notice that it has these extra windows, so I want to get rid of this one there, presumably. Well, that's interesting. So I want to get rid of these before moving it into position, because there's probably 2 overlapping. But that's the basic way that I would do it, is I would just make multiple copies, get rid of the openings that are not outside of a particular story, and then just slice the or, you know, change the height to fit on. Now this wall here, it says that it is based on the 1st floor. Well, we know that it's actually up on the 3rd floor. So it's not going to show, let's say there are going to be some inconsistencies in representation if we leave it alone. If, for example, we said only show on the home story, then it would show only in the ground floor, which would be crazy, because it's actually the upper one. What we want to do here is change the story linkage from 1st floor to 3rd floor. Now, if I do it this way, when I click here, you'll see it actually adjusts in space, which is not what we want. I'm going to click on it, and you see it jumped up in space, and the opening stayed locked in relationship to the story. So we don't want that. So I'll undo that. What we want is, instead of changing it here, we want to right-click and say relink home story. So relink home story allows us to change it to another story, but it says that the elevation and height values will remain unchanged. So when I say OK, look what happens. It'll say 3rd floor, and it will not move around. So it didn't move around. It says it's 3rd floor. So the same thing, obviously, with this one. we don't want it on the first floor. We right click here. Now, can we go to the edit menu, reference line and plane? Let's see, where would it be? Element settings. There's always got to be some something that design, connect. Because story settings, no. It's interesting. There must be I'm going to just do a help here and say, what was it? Relink. Element settings, relink home story. So that's where that particular command lives in the menu, and you can set up a keyboard shortcut if you ever wanted it. But I don't use it very frequently, so I just will right click, and say relink home story there, and we'll just say put it on the second floor. So that's how we would split it up. You basically are going to create multiple copies. Generally I like offsetting them so that you can sort of see what you've got. Get rid of the extra windows or doors on the stories that you don't need, and change the height. And then as a final step, use the relink home story to make sure that it's linked to the correct story. And of course, with these, I move them all out, in this case, 30 feet from this wall, this face, so you just have to move them back there. And of course, I can move them all back together. I can select all three of these, so there's 3 elements selected, and I could drag them back into position. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome. All right, let's see if there are any follow-up questions. Let's see. So Katrina, okay, all right, so this is a question about element transfer settings, so it's not related to this particular topic, but I can certainly try to answer your question, Katrina. All right, so that'll be a question that I can put in, that I can remember to answer for Katrina. Any follow-up questions from anyone else related to this? Let me know. I believe we have, let's see. Yes, I don't think there's anything else that I need to save here, but what I usually like doing is, just in case you want me to send this back, I can go save as, and just say after coaching. There now, did I keep forgetting, when you do a save as, you can save what you're looking at in different formats, and I really want it to be a solo project as opposed to a PDF, so I have to make sure I do this, then, and we'll have a copy of my reworked file. Yeah. Oh, now, Will, you have a good question. What about a window falling between floors? Okay, good question. So let's go back while I have this in, let's see, where's our 3D view here? So of course, these are separate ones. Here we have a single unified one. So we actually have 2 different, we can sort of simulate this in 2 different ways. Let's say that this window was in a stairwell. So let me just go and select this window here. Now this window is saying that it is, the header is up 7 feet 11 above the story, and it's 4 feet in height there. Let's just say if it was, if I moved it down, if I said I want to move this vertically down, and let's take it down, let's say 6 feet down here. So now it's just barely above this story, and going down to the lower story. If we, maybe we want this to be taller, I don't know. Let's see, let's not make it too complicated. I'll take the height up, be 6 feet there. All right, that's still not quite at the cutting plane, so let me just make it 7 feet there, and 5 feet. All right, so what I've done is I've sort of synthesized this in a situation where it's straddling 2 stories. Let's take a look on the floor plan and see what it shows up like. Now this is the 3rd floor. Here we're not, let's see, this is back in this area. well, it's not the, where are we? It's not these upper windows. So we're not seeing that. And let me actually move this to the side a little bit. I'll just move this over here just so we can easily see on screen. So there's no window showing here. If I go down a story, we are seeing the window here. And let me just again take off the graphic override so we can see this. So this window is the one that I made tall, 7 feet, and it's coming up to 5 feet. So it is showing on this second floor. And if I go down a story and turn off the graphic override here, are we seeing it? We're not seeing it. Why? Because this window is above the cutting plane, right? So the cutting plane of the is cutting at the 4-foot level. Now, we probably don't want to do this as a permanent solution, but let's look at the floor plan cut plane, and let's just say that I put it up at 7 feet 6 or something like that. So this should then cut through this window. Interesting. So am I looking? Yeah, it should be between those doors. Let's go back to the 3D view and say, what is the settings of the window? The window is setting, let's see, you go to the floor plan, projected here, okay, projected, symbolic, okay. So we have some options for the window. The window is obviously sitting in between the stories, but right now it's only showing where it's cut through. Let me say projected with overhead. We won't see any change on the plan because that's, I mean, in the 3D view. But now when I go to the plan, do I see it? No, we're not seeing that overhead, but there is a snap point there. Here is that window. Now we have, do I have the cut plane? Cut plane is up there. So show up to 1 story above here. So why are we not seeing this? So this is this, yeah, so we're seeing that window, but it's not showing there. So let's just see if we change the window settings to be floor plan, to be symbol. Oh, here, if we change this to symbolic, now we can see the window. So now it's showing symbolically because it is, the cut plane is passing through it. If I go up to the upper story, let me just go up to the next story and change this to no overrides. Do we have, why are we not seeing? Oh, here it is. No, I'm sorry. This is the window. Of course, the doors are down below. All right. So now we are seeing this, and I'll use the keyboard shortcut to go down a story. And what? It's interesting. This is the WFix 25. Editor story 1. Is this the? Oh, this is a different window. Okay, I'm getting confused here. So if I go back up and say this is the window that I want to change to symbolic. Okay, when it's in symbolic view, we have a different representation. If I go down the story, there it is. Okay, so when we have the window in this window in 3D, because I was getting confused with this other one, when we have this window straddling here, we need to make sure that that the cutting plane is going to show it in order to see it on both stories. We have no problem with placing it, anywhere in the vertical space, but in terms of seeing it on the plan, there are some limitations in terms of telling ArchiCAD how you want it to be represented. Now, if I go back to the ground floor here, because actually, so in fact, this is now back to the, what is it? Floor plan, cut plane. Now it's back to the normal 4-foot one, so I don't have to have the 7'6". But because I've made this window show symbolically, it's showing because it does protrude down into that story. Now, what if I go up to the 3rd floor? That window is not showing because it's not relevant to the 3rd floor, but it will show on the 2nd floor and the 1st. So while I stumbled around a little bit, the main thing is that when you have a window that does in a stairwell that straddles 2 stories, if you make the window have a symbolic representation, then it can show on the relevant stories without regard to the cutting plane. If you're doing it with the projected one, then you have to adjust the cutting plane, you know, and that may be an issue in terms of making it show up on the plan. So symbolic would be good. Now it's interesting that this symbolic here is showing all its detail, whereas the on the plan it was not. And I think that has to do with your model view options, which say, let's show some things with an override. Let's just see, say, floor plans. You can see now this window is showing normally. So there was an override in terms of the model view options that made at least this window change its appearance, even though the other windows did not. So we'd have to look at what is the graphic override or the model view option. In schematic plans, it says show entire window here, okay. But if we go to detail level for windows and doors, so it says it's going to show a, all right, so here is another little complication. I'll try to explain it briefly before we move on. The model view option for the schematic plans made the windows and doors simpler, but it only affects it if the element is set for show reveal and symbol 2D detail level. This says always show this particular one in a detailed fashion there. If we say by MVO or model view options, then you can see how it simplifies this, you know, to get this similar representation. So how would we get this one to have more detail? We look at floor plan display symbolic. So why does this have symbolic and doesn't have the, I think it's actually floor plan and section. Here we go. Okay, so this is another setting, and it is confusing because we have some settings here and we have some settings here. So here I'm going to say I might want to make this detail whenever I do show it there. This is only for the reveal that we're worried about, but this, let's just make it detailed. And now we have that. Okay, so now if I go up to the 2nd floor, we've got a good representation. So bottom line is, if you have multiple story wall, this is going to allow us to show it just by choosing how detailed we want it to be, rather than overriding it with the model view options to make it simpler. So this is, as long as it sticks into the wall, and you use the symbolic representation, it will look clean. Now here, the final step in this is if we did want to have something similar over here, let me just eyedrop this window and pop it in into this wall. Stop that there. All right, so this wall, this window does exist down here, but of course, this wall only exists up here. So what's happening is the window is sticking down into the lower wall. and this lower wall doesn't have any cutout. So how would you do a similar thing where you have them stacked? Well, the answer is I take this window and I'm going to drag a copy of it. So I'm going to drag a copy of it just to the side, just to so visually it's not confusing. So I've got now 2 copies. I'm going to drag this window. I can drag this anywhere in space, and if I want to, I can drag it even down into the lower wall. So I just use the drag command, and I've dragged it into the lower wall, and I'll drag this here. Now what I've got right now is 2 stacked windows. Pretty obvious that we actually have a duplicate there, and this is not the design. But let's just take a look on the floor plan, and we'll go to here. So we have a lower window, and if I go to the next story up, we'll see the upper window, right? So they look almost correct. I mean, there's I guess another window that that it's conflicting with, but if we ignore that, just say this window that I just dragged looks correct. Well, of course it looks terrible in 3D because this is not lined up. Well, what I can do is I can take this window and say, this window, I would like to relink it to, let's see, can we relink here? Say, change it to relink anchor stories. This is a different place where we get this. And I'll say it's this one, this window should think of itself as part of the first floor. Now, we didn't see any change here. Now I'm going to drag it up. So we now have 2 windows here overlapping each other. And of course, it looks clean there. When I go to the first floor, remember we have that extra window that was, I guess, is this one here, which is potentially something that, let me just move this over so we're not distracted by that. There, okay. So now we have, oh, and that, I guess it's overlapping the door, isn't it? Yeah, so that's when I put these ones here. But what I want to point out is that we actually have 2 windows in this place. If we had a schedule, we'd have 2 windows, and that's not appropriate. So what's the way to work this out? I'm going to take this. We're on the ground floor. Try to do this where it's not confusing. I'm going to drag it over, let's just say a foot, because what I want to do is demonstrate something where it's not too confusing. See, here's this extra copy. This is the one that's in the lower story. It's based on the story 1, and this is the one in the upper story. So this one here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explode it. Now, what happens when you explode an element? And I think we can do this in 3D. We reshape, no, explode into current view because we're not in a view, the plan. So let me go to the first floor, and I'll take this window here, and I'll say explode into current view. Why am I going to do this? Because, and I'll get rid of the original window. I'm just going to leave the graphic. Now it looks much the same. It looks like a nice window there. But if I hover over this, and let's see if I go to the window tool, let's see the window tool, and I say select all windows, there is a window still here. Well, what is this window? It is a simple window opening. It is just a cutout. It's a cutout. So there is a window opening, and then there is line work. You can see this is a line. Let me just change this to turn off true line weight. So that's a line. That's a line. All of these are just lines of symbols. So this looks like a window, but it's actually an empty opening. Now, if we go to 3D, what I've got is one window here, and then I have an empty opening. This is the empty opening. Now, I deliberately offset it just so you could see what the two elements were, but now I wouldn't normally do that. I would leave them in lined up. So now the empty opening is in the lower wall. You can see the lower wall has that cutout, and the upper wall has the window. So it's inevitably somewhat confusing, but I'm going to just retrace my steps conceptually, so hopefully you get this. If you have stacked walls, you place the window in one wall, and you place a similar window in the other wall. Make sure that they overlap in space, and then for one of the walls, either the lower or the upper, you explode the window and turn it into an empty opening and line work. And so what happens is on the plan, on this lower story, we're seeing an empty opening with some line work that makes it look like a window, whereas in the upper wall, we actually have the window that just happens to be sticking down. So this is how you do it when you stack, when you have the stack thing, is you have one window and an exploded copy of the window in the other story so that it cuts out the whole. So that question was from Will. Let me open up Will's line and see if that answers Will's question. So Will, I'm opening up your line.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, so does that give you clarity on how you would approach it?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
All right, any follow-up questions on that?
No, that trick of exploding the window on top of itself was very helpful. That was good.
Okay, well, my glad that came across. And now the original person talking to, what was it, Mark?
It's
Yeah.
Mark.
Yeah, so Mark, did you follow that?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, so we've just looked at different ways to stack walls and have, you know, windows on different stories, and what happens when you have a stairwell or something and the window straddles the two stories. You know, it's simple when you have a multi-story wall, and it's doable when you have multiple stacked walls. You just have to do a copy of the window and explode it. There. Okay, now John Gilchrist has a comment. I do the same thing, but just change one of the windows or doors to an empty opening. So John, yeah, I mean, when you explode it, it becomes the empty opening, and it keeps the line work. Yes, I only changed one of them because we do need to keep the other one for the schedule, and of course, as a 3D element. So Paul says, can you just place, two questions. So Paul, be sure to change one of the window IDs to XXX or something, or you'll have an extra window in the schedule. So if you left the windows, if you left the two windows, duplicate windows in place, you might not notice it in 3D or in elevation. They, in theory, would show up in the schedule. You could exclude it from the schedule by using an ID. That would be another option. You would still have two windows there, but you might exclude the one by filtering it, saying, I only want to list windows that have an ID starting with W and not, you know, ones that say X. So that would be an option. You know, the exclusion of saying, hey, if it's an empty opening, you probably would want to put an ID for that as, you know, something other than a W. Or you'd have the filter in the schedule saying, don't list any empty openings, because empty openings are just cutouts in the wall. And Paul says, can you just place an opening by itself? Yes, you can. So let me open up your line, Paul. So, all right, your line is open. So if I go to the window tool, actually that's the opening tool. Here's the window tool. So if I go to the window tool and we're selecting, you know, windows from, you know, just the normal list, if we type in empty here, there's W empty, which would have a framed opening. And then there are going to be ones that are just rectangular window opening, which would be an unframed one. So you can put in any of those yourself anytime you need to, and there's a similar one for doors. The reason why I did it the other way, which was to put a second window in and then explode it, is because I wanted the line work. I wanted the line work to show as if there was a window on that story, but I don't want another window on that story. Okay, Mackenzie says, when we have windows and doors spanning multiple stories, we just model one as a window on one floor and an empty opening on the other floor. And if you locate the actual window on the lower floor, if I remember correctly, you can see it on both floors if you get the settings right. Show on relevant stories. Line work can be really hard to manage if things change. Okay, so you're saying, and let me open up your line, Mackenzie. Let's see here, Mackenzie. Interesting. It's not letting me open up your line. Oh, wait, no, there's another one here. Unmute there. Okay, you were logged in twice. Oh, you're logged in 3 times. So, Mackenzie, I've opened up all 3 of your lines. Okay. Well, if you do get a microphone working, you can talk. So she mentions, sorry, no mic today. All right. Paul Adams says, I've never seen that trick before. Good. And John Gilchrist, yeah, you can exclude empty windows from the schedule there. All right. So, but Mackenzie, you say that you have the window saying that you can see it on both floors if you get the settings right, show on relevant stories. So let's just see if we take this window. So this is the actual, that's the simple window opening. That's one of the confusing things, is that there are 2 elements here. If I hover over this, you can see that there is the simple window opening, and then it says multiple elements with a tab. If I hit the tab key on the keyboard, then it says, oh, you're now referencing, before you select, this actual window, you know, the one with the siding. I'm going to select it. And you're saying that there could be a setting that allows me to show projected. Now, here's the issue is, yes, if you do have it as projected, then it can show on multiple stories, but you'll have to have the cut plane show cut through the window. If the cut plane is below the window, then you won't see that. So I believe that's the compromise, and that's why I go with the line work. But of course, you know, line work, yeah, it is separate from the element. If you're moving the windows around, it could be an issue. You could always group the line work because it is just pure 2D information. You can make it a group so that you could grab it and move it. All right, so Tracy. Okay, so Tracy, so Mackenzie works for Tracy Stone. Tracy says that she's online and also logged in under the same name as Mackenzie. So a little bit of confusion there. All right. So anyway, we've certainly spent a lot of time on this. I hope you all found it somewhat of interest, or very, very much of interest. Let's take a look at some of the questions that came in related to story levels and topographic information. So we'll switch gears on that. Now, let me see here. So, and I want to thank Mark for supplying this question, which gave us a lot to work with. Okay, somebody's got this thing saying that his email address was hacked, so I already have a copy of that to follow up to take his email address out. All right, Yasik sent something here. Okay, so this is building terrain. Let me just, yeah, this is relatively quick here. Yasik isn't on the line, but I think because I can do it pretty quickly, I'm going to use this as a starting point, and then I'll switch to the other projects that also have questions about elevation. So we'll go to preview. He sent in this file. This is a PDF, and he said he wants to be able to build the topography. We can see here contour lines, two different ones. I asked him, well, are these related? Are they the same scale? Because this one doesn't have any scale. Yeah, I mean, one assumes if there's one scale here, it probably applies to both, but I don't quite get the relationship between these. What I'm going to do is use this as a scaling one and just build at least part of this terrain here. I think it's a project that has multiple buildings and that it's doing some work in different parts of the site, he mentioned. So this is a PDF. He also supplied a DWG. I'm going to use the PDF first here. So let me go and just save this, and then we'll create a new one here. And the reason why I want to do this first is because I can demonstrate a couple of things really quickly about importing a PDF and scaling it. Because when you want to bring in graphic information, if it's not already in CAD, then if it's a scan or if it was saved out in PDF format, then you need to understand how to get things to the proper scale. So here we have a blank file. Let me just go back to this preview. It's and zoom in here. So what scale are we at? Well, this is showing 30 feet here. It doesn't say, does it have a thing saying scale 1 inch equals 15 feet? Okay, so 1 inch equals 15 feet. Now, the reason why that's important to note is that when I bring in this PDF, it will be easiest if I preset the scale to match the PDF. Now, I'm not going to change the scale of my actual plan, and in fact, I'm not going to bring in the PDF into the plan. I'm going to create a new worksheet. So worksheets, like details, are 2D working areas, and so I can, there are some in the standard template, whatever you're using with Graphisoft or with master template, that are preset, but I'm going to create a new independent worksheet, which will be a new work area, and we'll just call this survey. Here. All right, so now I've got a new work area. You can see just a little X for the origin point there. I'll change the scale of this to 1 inch equals 15 feet is not an available scale here. Let me just pick 1 inch equals 10 feet and say, well, 1 inch equals 10 feet would be 1 to 120. Right, and 1 inch equals, if I do custom scale here, yeah, 120. So let me just make it 15 feet would be 180 here. It says 1 to 180, but that's the 1 inch equals 15 feet there. Now, to bring in the PDF, we go to the file menu and we can say that we'd like to place external content, and I'd like to place an external drawing. So the external drawing, it allows me to go find this now. Oh, I have to save it out, I guess. Here, this PDF, let me download that. All right, so now it should be 0168 there. Let me find it. So 0168 PDF, so all available types. It's a PDF file. There we go, open. Now, when I'm placing it, it gives me this little funny cursor. I'm going to go to the corner, or to this little X origin point and click. Now, this that's sort of arbitrary. It could be anywhere. You can certainly feel free to move it, but right now I want to just see, am I at scale? You can see that graphic marker here. If I use the measure command and hover over it, you notice there's no snapping here because the PDF doesn't have snaps. But if I click on this, it says, yeah, 30 feet. And a fraction of an inch off. So this is exactly at scale there. If I look at, I think there is a reference here to the front of the building. No, I thought, it doesn't actually indicate it. Somehow I thought that there was, I remembered seeing a linear reference, but of course this is, we know that if this is in scale, everything else is in scale. Now, if this is maybe a more interesting thing to do a quick sketch of, if we look here, 75 feet going, oh, this is such a tiny amount of grade, 77. Yeah, it's hardly any. Let me see if the other one is more dramatic. It certainly has more points. Yeah, this is going up to 100 feet and down to, 75, 73. All right, so this one will be at least more interesting visually to do. Now, each one of these lines here, I'm assuming, is a contour line, whereas we do have some point elevations. And what typically happens with these surveys is they measure a bunch of points and then they let the computer in some tool calculate the estimated contour line. They're not actually measuring and trying to get a line on the ground that's at that elevation. They're calculating what the theoretical point would be. So there's a difference between point elevations and contour lines. Now, if we look here, this is 75.14. Here's the 75 line, and this would be the 76, 77, 78. We can see the point elevations, slightly off of those lines. So this is what we're going to be matching. Now, we don't really have a site boundary here. What I'm going to do is just draw something that's just around this area and has the general lay of the land. It will grow or get taller. And I'm not going to do every single line because I just want to demonstrate the principles. You can do as many lines as you need, but typically you're going to do more detail around something that's going to be built and less for just where you're going to see the ground sloping and possibly some vegetation, because you're not going to be measuring the dirt or the section through it so closely. Now, this is a PDF, as we know, I just brought in. It is in a worksheet. Worksheets only have 2D information, so I could draw on top of this, but really what I want to do is go back to the first floor and show this survey as a trace reference. So when I show it as a trace reference, we can see the information behind it. Now, I'm on the floor plan at 1/4 inch to a foot. That would mean that the way that markers show and the way that text shows is going to be legible at 1/4 inch. Now, how big is this area? And is this in scale? Let's just go scroll down and say, are we still seeing things in scale? So I go measure from here to here, and yeah, there's the 30 feet. So even though the PDF was at a whole different scale, as long as it measured correctly, then it will relate to the building world. Now, of course, this initial template area at 1/4 inch to a foot, we'd be building something within the, a certain size, and this is much bigger. This is the site. So we might have the building just be a small part of it. Now, where are we doing the building? If these are some benches, here's some buildings, we might need to adjust the placement of it. But right now, let's just get the terrain, a quick version of that. So one thing is I'm going to assume that, because both of those seem to have 70 as a number, that the elevation of the project is somewhere in that 70-foot range. So the first thing that we do in any project related to building a site is going to the options, project preferences, location settings, and set up where we want the first floor or the ground floor or the main project 0 to relate to. And that is going to be set in a height above sea level, or if you're in places like Australia, you might have a reference like AHD, Australia Height Datum. So I'll say that, let's say that at 72 feet is my ground floor. I don't know exactly what this is, but let's just say 72. That's going to be somewhere in that vicinity. Now, when I do that, and I go and place, if I go to start placing a wall, it'll say, well, this wall on this story, well, actually, why are we on the second floor? We're on the first floor. Oh, okay, this is the first floor. Yeah, so this is the link stories. Home story, first floor, right, okay. Oh, and that's a top link. But if I said, what is the height of this in relationship to sea level, it'd say, oh, you're 72 feet above sea level. So this is our project 0 is the first floor would be a common thing. And it keeps track of the fact that I said, oh, the whole project is 72 feet above. So let me just draw actually, we have a couple of building pieces here. So I'll just, without paying too much attention to the wall settings, I'll just do a series of walls. And we'll flip this here. And here. Now, when we have a PDF, we do not have snap points. So this is inevitably an approximation here. And if I wanted it to be on an exact 45-degree angle or whatever angle I'd want and precise size, I'd have to draft that in more precisely. But right now I want to just do the terrain. So what am I going to do here? I know I'm in scale. I'm going to go and place in the terrain. So the terrain mesh has some settings here. There's some 3D appearance, the top being grass would be a common thing. And if you cut through it, what is it going to look like? It's going to have some, cut color and it'll be made of, let's see if this is, earth. When you cut through it, this is what it'll look like. It'll have a particular pattern there. But there is a line in space that is the reference height, and most of the contours generally are going to be placed above that. And then there's going to be a base. So this is just saying, hey, let's give it a 3-foot thickness as the base there. So what I want to do is say that in reference to sea level, I might want to say that this is up at 70 feet. So that says that it's 2 feet above the, 2 feet below the ground floor level. This is sort of arbitrary, but what we'll see is that this is a line in space that will be important when we look in 3D. And I'll do something sort of a polygon shape here. Now, if you have a survey, what do you call it? If you have property boundaries that you can trace, you'd want to use that. But right now, clearly, this is not the property boundary. Now, what do we have if I look in 3D? Nothing too surprising, but we have the walls floating at the 0 level, project 0 at 72, and the top of this at 70 feet, just a little bit below that. Of course, it's going to be graded in a moment, and that's the whole idea here. So how do we get a grade? The simplest thing is to, my general recommendation is that before you do any work, you get the boundary points at least up into the vicinity. So if this is 100 feet and this is 90 down in this area, I'm going to guess that this is about 105. So I'll say that the elevation here is 105. Not to the main mesh reference plane, but to sea level, because I'm reading off this and I want to say 105 here to sea level. Okay, now this point here, let's just say that that's maybe it's 107, whatever, I don't know. And this one, if we think that it's sort of a continuation of this, then it's going to be about 95. So I have how many points to do here? This one is down at 70, let's say it's 74. And this is down a little lower, so maybe it's going to be 68. And down here, 75 or something like that. All right, so now if I look in 3D, I've started to bury that building because it was 100 feet up in the back end. So it's a real slope. Now, I don't know how the building will be, but as soon as we start grading this, we'll see. So I'll just say maybe this line here, this is the 70. See, this one says 75, so here's 76. Let me just do the 76 line. So the way that we do this terrain is select the mesh tool, the mesh element, make sure the mesh tool is active, make sure that we're in the polygon method as opposed to rectangular. That allows us to click on a number of points and go, and I'll just sort of approximate this here. So I'm just doing it as much as it needs to be to follow this visually. And when I create it, I'll just say add new points, and I don't care about the fitting. But then after I do it, I'll press down on this and say I'd like to change this to 76 feet above sea level. Now I could also say that it's 4 feet above project zero, or 6 feet above the mesh reference plane, but I'll just do sea level because it's a little easier to do, and just make sure that I set this here. Now I'll say apply to all, and that'll be all of these points in this terrain. Now here's the 80-foot line, right? So I'll go in and do some points here, and we don't need all that many points, but I'll just go down and that's 80.5, yeah. And then I click on the last point where I want to stop, and then I can say, go add these points, and then click on one of these and say, I want to set it to be 80 feet, apply to all. So what I've just done is I've got the overall slope, and then I've got a sort of a flatter area going between 76 and 80, I think there. And if we go to 3D, you can see how these lines, what's going on. This is 76, that's 80. And of course, these were set at starting at 72, just arbitrarily there. So that's how we build the terrain. Here, I'll just do two more quick contour lines. So we have, let's say the 90-foot line. This is 92.6, 92, 91, 90. So this would be 90. And I really don't even have to have as many points as I just did, because it's going to be, it's pretty much a straight line here, but you can do as many or as few as you need. So I'll just say 90, apply to all, and we'll do the 80, let's say 84, 85. So we'll do 89, 8, 7, 6, 5. So 85. All right, so now if I go back to 3D, you can see some slight changes here. Now, we're not seeing any sharp edges there. It's blending in this the surface there. If I change my view to let's see, 3D view options to hidden line vectorial, we can see, that it's not showing us any of the extra contour lines. Now, if we have the terrain mesh, we can say that we'd like the model to have all ridges sharp, and now we're going to see some really weird triangulation. This is what it's actually doing to create that. It's a triangulated mesh there. If I undo it, we'll see that it's a little hard to tell in the white line version, but this is what it's basically pretending that these are smoothly graded. Now let's see, I think that probably answers the main question that he had, which was creating a 3D site with contours from a DWG survey file or a PDF print. So if you do bring in the DWG, you want to, I won't demonstrate that right now. You'll just want to make sure that it is scaled properly. And there is an option for setting what's called the measurement unit, which will make it scale. So you don't actually pay attention to the, you don't need to pay attention in quite the same way to the drawing scale, like I set it to 1 inch equals 15 feet. That will determine the way that text is represented. But the most important thing is that you set the measurement unit for the DWG to be either an inch, a foot, a meter, or a centimeter would be typical depending upon where you're located and how it's set up. All right, so hopefully for Jacek that answers his question. He said he wasn't able to be on here. And okay, so this is now, I'm going to now bring up a question, the question from Holly Bergen. Is Holly on here? Hopefully Holly's on. Oh no, Holly is not on. I think that's her name. Because she had a very complicated, here's a very complicated one. So it's Holly is not on here. Let me just scan this and see if she's under by another name. No, so I don't know if she was on and left or what. Okay, so now Doug Muir says, is there a method if you convert PDF to vector lines that you can select one of them and create a contour? Okay, so let's go here and let me open up your line, Doug. Doug, your line is now open. Okay, so if I go to the worksheet, this is the PDF that's been brought in. Now, as I demonstrated earlier today in exploding the window in that plan, you can use the explode command to explode many elements in ArchiCAD, 3D elements, into 2D line work. And you can, in some cases, do that with PDFs. It depends upon how it was created. If I go to the edit menu and I say reshape, explode into current view, I'm going to attempt to do this. When I say explode into current view, I'll say keep original elements after exploding. That'll actually keep the PDF, but also potentially have line work here. Right now, it would put all of the lines onto the layer that this drawing is on, which is G Drawings 2D, and line types. This would basically keep it very simple, but you can potentially import embedded layers when you explode things. I'll just say okay, and thinking about it, and all right, now do see a slight change here. We still have just one thing selected, which is the PDF. I'm just going to drag it to the side. And we can see now that we do have lines. So we actually, once we've done that, we can snap. Remember I was saying we couldn't snap to the building. Now we can. This is a polyline and it does have snap points. So when you do explode it, you have the option, it makes it possible to snap. Now the question that, by the way, I'm getting a bunch of background noise from you, Doug. Doug, you're the one who has the question, so I'm going to leave your line open, but if there is a way to minimize the background noise, that would be good. So Doug, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. I'll see if I can have the background noise cut back. Rob,
Yeah.
can we have quiet back there? Sorry.
All right. So what I'm going to point out is that if you can see here, I did just a handful of points. Now I've moved the PDF over to the side. You'll see that this is the trace reference of the PDF, and this is the trace reference of the actual line work. So can we trace this line work? You can see there's snap points here. Well, if I select this mesh and I've got the mesh tool active, and let's say that I wanted to make this is the This is the 99-foot line. The 100-foot line is sort of broken. So let's look at the 99-foot line. If I use the magic wand, you see what it did?
Yep.
So the magic wand, that's with the space bar. It said, all right, I'm going to trace all the points that are connected to, the one I was hovering over, and I will add them as sample points to this mesh. Now, it had two problems. One is it got confused with this 3 and didn't continue on. But the bigger issue, because we could always go on and do the next section and the next section, the bigger issue is that it's got all of these points which are useless because it's virtually a straight line and it's nowhere near the building, is what it would appear. So why do we have so much detail? If you did this for every single one of these contour lines, you would end up with a mesh with thousands or even millions of times more polygons than you need. Because where did these points come from? They didn't come from a whole bunch of points on the ground being surveyed. They came from the CAD program approximating where in space that contour line would be. Now, visually, they look like almost a straight line. And practically, you should make it a straight line. Don't use the magic wand for a series like this, because you will literally, if I do this for each one of these, look at that. And I've seen people do this. They've gone through and gone, wow, this is so fantastic. Look at that. They build up, terrain meshes that are tremendously detailed for no purpose. So I don't recommend the magic wand thing, but there are cases where it can be useful. So understanding that you can explode a PDF, and in many cases like this, I could now get these walls more precisely. Let me just get rid of the walls. The only walls I had were, let's see, select all the walls, delete them. Now, if I go to the wall tool, I will be able to snap. It's actually snapping to that. Now, of course, I have to zoom in and make sure I'm snapping to the right point, that it's this point and that point, but it is snapping that we're getting there. All right, so does that answer your question, Doug?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, so let me just undo back. So we do have that in case we want those buildings. All right, so that's the basics of bringing in something and then creating that mesh. And what I want to point out in 3D here, the other thing is, if we go back to our sort of more common view of 3D views here, and we have the texture, is that, what do I want to say? You can see this blue line in space here. And the bottom is 3 feet lower. It's just a particular little platform. The only place where I went down below that was this one. Now, it's fine. You can actually take these points down, but basically, instead of having the blue line at sea level and having this 72 feet and 75 feet and 100 feet above sea level, that's what I've seen many people do. They set the mesh at sea level, and then they say, oh, this is 75 feet, that's 100 feet, that's whatever. Well, you end up with a huge platform that's, 100 feet thick or 2,000 feet thick. I mean, it can be really crazy. So I would always set the mesh reference, the blue line, which is this top here. Actually, I'm sorry, it's this top in relationship to sea level at something reasonable. This blue line is 70 feet. Most of the property is up above 70 feet. And this says just have a 3-foot platform and then, build up things on top of it. So don't set this at sea level. Set it in relationship to your site. And you can see that you can actually look at all of these different, things in relationship to the stories in relationship to sea level. They're all, this is not moving. I'm just saying, show me the information with different references. Okay, so now Holly does not appear to be on the call, which is too bad because she had a very richly complicated project. Now there was somebody else who also asked about terrain modeling, and that was Nestor. Create a mesh based on pictures. Okay, so we could do that. Now Nestor is in the coaching, my ArchiCAD coaching program, so we could defer that till we finish our public thing. Let me just see who else. So Mark, we worked on. Jacek is this one here. And yeah, I think yeah, actually. So then it was somebody else who typed in something. Let's see. No, exclude. Okay, Katrina had the separate questions. Let me see about that. Okay, now Richard White, you have a comment. So you typically require XYZ files from the surveyor. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about that, and let me open up your line, Richard, because that's certainly an important option that you can consider. So Richard, your line is open. So Richard, are you there? You just typed in your question 3 minutes ago, so.
How's that?
Yeah, can hear you, perfect. So you said that you get an XYZ file from the surveyor. So is that something that you find is pretty easy? They say, sure, I can get that for you?
It took a couple of requests. I started doing that when that function came onto ArchiCAD, and it took a little while to get the surveyors on board, but up here near Ottawa, it's sort of easy now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
now I forget where you get that. This is this done from interoperability, place mesh from surveyor's data?
That's right. And so when you look at that that PDF and where you see those point elevations like 75.65, it'll import as a mesh, and every time there's a point where they put their total station down, it'll come in at exactly that elevation.
Right. Okay. So let me just bring everybody up to speed, because certainly many people are not familiar with this workflow. So you can get, in many cases, a data file from the surveyor, which is more the raw data than the contours. Because if you think about it, they set their total station survey instrument on a bunch of places on the site, and it automatically records the XY position for the location, as well as, of course, the elevation. It records it in, its own little, computer on board, or whatever, you call it, processor. And then it can export it for use. And so a common thing is that it would go into a land survey mapping tool that'll actually create a 3D model, that'll create contour lines and spit that out. That's what we saw with all those lines, those sort of little segmented lines. But you can get the raw data. Now, if you get the raw data, it's going to be in a text file. I don't have a sample of that, but basically it'll be like a spreadsheet. It'll have X, Y, Z, and maybe a number identifier, like this is point number 103, point number 104, 105. They'll each have some identifier there. Now, when you do import it, you basically need to tell ArchiCAD which is the X, which is the Y, which is the Z, which is the identifier. I think you go through a quick process of just telling it, because maybe the order of those data points can vary. But what you end up with, what your point, Richard, is that you're going to end up with these dots, and the dot here will be at 75.14 feet, and this one will be 75.6, and etc. So you get all of these dots. Those are the actual surveyed points. Now, when you bring it in, you will end up with a mesh But instead of having contour lines, you will have this, and I'm just going to actually just place a, let's see if we have a mesh here. I select the mesh again, and I go, let's say, click on this and click twice. That's a dot, right? Let me just place this one here, 75. All right. So I may have been slightly off on that dot, but this point I can say, you know what? In relationship to sea level is 75.14. Apply to all doesn't really matter. This is the only one in the sequence. Apply to all would be all of them in a polyline. There, let me just do this point here, and this is 75.65. Now, you're not going to do that because it will automatically have those points in there. But what I want to show in 3D is that we now have these points. So you'd end up with a whole bunch of points that would represent the terrain. Now you won't have contour lines when you do it that way. Now that may not be an issue, and you may just have the contour lines brought in as a PDF or some graphic thing, but you will have a very precise terrain model that you don't have to do any extra work on. Now, do you find the terrain model is a reasonable level of detail, or do you find that it seems excessive?
Only once that I find it excessive, and rather than the surveyor going on site with a total station, they sent a drone up on 50 acres, and they had points at something like a 2-inch interval on 50 acres, if you can imagine.
Mm.
You know, I couldn't open it. It was impossible. So they had to dumb it down 3 times before it was of any use.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, a human measuring points is going to have some reasonable level of resolution. They're not going to spend, a month surveying the site and getting, 1 million points. But when you have a drone, it's basically just taking measurements with a laser finder, and you can get. I mean, it collects just an absolutely astounding amount of data. So it's way more than you need for building a mesh, and yeah, dumbing it down, basically subsampling it down would be required. Anyway, as a side note, if you ended up with a whole bunch of these points, so you do the X, Y, and you do not have contour lines, and if for some reason you can't get them from your surveyor, because they probably have them as well, then the way that you could create contour lines is you could literally do a temporary cut of part of the line. In fact, I'll just demonstrate this as sort of a fun little thing. If I wanted to find where the contour line is, there's some interesting things off here, but let's just say that I wanted to find the 95-foot contour line. How might I do that? I'm going to take the mesh or the slab tool, and I'll say that it's in relationship to sea level. I want the top of it to be at, what was I saying, 95 feet would be good. That's going to be its top. And it's going to be just a simple volume airspace strong. Actually, I know I want it to be visible, so we'll just do it as a generic exterior thing. And we'll take it down to 0. That's sort of arbitrary, but what am I going to do? I'm going to just draw this as a box here. Now let's look in 3D. You can see that this slab is at the 95-foot level, and this is the part above 95 feet, goes up to 100 roughly. Now, if I were to at least temporarily, let's see, how would we visualize this? I'm trying to remember what the method is. So one possibility is, let's go to the solid element operations make the terrain mesh the target, make the slab the operator, and use the subtraction. So now you can see the terrain is just this part here. It actually has forgotten all the other data, at least in 3D. And if I were to take this element here, this slab element, let's see, it's on slabs 3D, and I go and say hide this layer, you can see now just what we're seeing is the top part. So this line along here is the 95-foot contour line. Now we can, when we're looking at the ground floor, we're not going to see that contour line because the solid element operations only affect things in 3D, but we can take a view. Let's see, so if we take, we're in 3D and I switch my view to 3D projection settings to say, I want to do a parallel projection. And instead of being an isometric, I want to do a top-down view. So what are we seeing here now? We're seeing here is the contour line. This is the, in theory, the property boundary, right? And I can then create a 3D document from it. And we'll just say this is contour line drawing. All right. All right. So now this, you can see this view. If I go to the first floor and we take the 3D document that's the contour line drawing and say show as trace reference. Contour line drawing. So we're on the first floor. Why are we not seeing? Okay, this is the slab here. Were we not on a top view? 3D projection settings. We're on 270 top view. Yeah, that should be there. So this should line up with, oh, no, it didn't refresh. But you can see now this shaded area is what I have. So I can basically go and do a polyline if I wanted to, and trace this. It actually does have snap points, but that's a polyline. So now if I go to this 3D view here and turn back on the layer that includes the this slab and change this height to 90 feet, you can see now it reveals more because it's gone down in space, and that what do you call it, 3D view, a 3D drawing has now updated. And when I go to the floor plan and we do rebuild reference, let's see, rebuild reference, why is this? Maybe we just have to zoom in and out. Why is that? First floor. I'm wondering why this is not updating automatically here. Let me just bring up the trace and reference palette and flip back and forth and rebuild. Why is that? Oh, you know what? I guess a part of it is that the I need to turn this layer off. So this, let's turn this layer off. Now we have that. And then this 3D line drawing, redefined based on current 3D window. Why is the, why are these off? Is there a shadow in the 3D window? Redefined based on current 3D window. All right, something's going a little bit funny. I'm not quite sure why it's not updating correctly here. But in theory, what we should be able to do is we should be able to see, this line in the 3D drawing here. I don't know why this is, what's going on with that. And then we should, let's see if we do the view, 3D projection settings, top view. Not quite sure what's rebuild for model. All right, so something went a little bit funny, but ultimately you should within a few minutes be able to synthesize the contour lines based on using solid element operations. Just essentially in sequence, just taking that cutting element down, through different levels to generate where the lines are. So that would be a way to create that. So we are not quite at the 2-hour mark. There was a question earlier from Katrina. Let's see, is Katrina still on the call? No, she disappeared. Oh, that's too bad. Okay. So she asked, is there a way to transfer element settings more than once without reselecting transfer element settings? I select multiple items to change at one time. Okay, all right. I wish I had read through this more fully earlier because it does have a simple answer. Now, if we, let's say that, let me just draw a wall just here. So we have a wall. And I'm going to go and we'll just say here's a window, and here's another window here. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate this by saying, all right, let's say here's the window we want. Let's just change this to a different type of window instead of a simple casement. Let's just do a triple sash here. All right, so now the point is that if I drop this window and I wanted to inject it into more than one element, transferring the parameters, instead of using this little icon that says inject parameters, I can use the keyboard shortcut, which is indicated here, Command Shift. Well, actually it's Command Option on the Mac, or Control Alt on Windows. So by holding those two keys down, I can go and click and click and click. I can click as many elements as I want. So I'm holding those down and I can inject those settings. So not necessarily a great example here. I'm just undoing those changes, but basically the idea is that you've got a setting that you've picked up or set manually, and it's the default for the tool. So if you were to create another window or another element of that type, it's set up as the default. And in order to transfer it into multiple elements, to change them, you can hold down the keyboard shortcut for the syringe tool to transfer those element settings. And that keyboard shortcut on the Mac is Command Option. On Windows, it'd be Control Alt, I believe. And you hold down those two keys and then you move around and click the mouse. So that answers Katrina's question, even though she's not here, which is too bad. All right, last chance then for questions here. Now, Will said he sent in earlier an Excel file with point data for a question. Okay, well, that's interesting. So we can actually look at that. So Will, might as well finish up with that. So Will, your line is open, and you sent that in. So Will, here, mesh tool training, so possibly here. Goes to the recording. Okay, that was mesh tool training. So I did you send it? How did you send it, Will?
I sent it through Slack last week.
Okay, all right, that's right, while I was on vacation.
Yes.
And so there it is. Okay, so we're in Slack. So for those of you who are not a member of the ArchiCAD coaching program, I do these coaching calls weekly for members. You can become a member by going to archicadtraining.com/coaching and sign up, or you can purchase one of my courses like the ArchiCAD Best Practices 2020 course, and you do get membership for 6 months in the coaching program. So if you want my help on a regular basis, that would be the way to do it. You also get access to this Slack discussion area where you can post questions and get help as well. So here we have survey points. So we have 2 cleaned, and then this one. So which one should I use?
The one that's clean is the actual importable spreadsheet.
Okay, so let me download that here. So this is Sheik's survey points claimed. Okay, and what's the difference between these? This we can open them. I can open it up
It's
so that.
got a couple extra columns that are superfluous to the import. You have to get rid of.
All right. So if we look at this, all right. So this is the original one you got from a surveyor, and if I use the preview function on the Mac, we can see it's point number 100, 101, 104, etc. So these are the numbers. These are the XYZ positions, and these looks like this has a dot. So these, oh no, this is a 6481.1582. So it's 1, 2, 3 coordinates, and then this CL or EP or whatever. So these are some indicators that we don't want in there. So if you open it up in a spreadsheet, you delete that column, and then you end up when you save it out and save it with tab delimited, then we end up with just the data points here. Okay, so this is the point of what we're going to be bringing in. Let's just see in here, if I were to zoom out, whatever, file menu, interoperability, place surveyor's data, and we have the cleaned for import text files. I don't know why these are all gray, but it is allowing me to select it and say open it. And it says surveyor's units. I assume you're probably in feet here. Define graphically. So this allows me to move it around. You know, the XY position can be moved around, or I can have it in the original location and zoom to the new mesh. And project 0 is above sea level by whatever. Well, I set it to be 72 feet.
I think I would define it graphically. I don't know. The location might be out in Neverland.
Yeah, so I mean, we can define it graphically, but this is saying when I place it in, how is the height of these things? If we go back to your data points,
20, 30 feet.
well, this is okay. This is 6439, so this would probably not be 6,400 feet. This would be 6,400 inches, right?
Yes.
Or no, this is the point elevation. It's the 42.
That's the point elevation, correct.
All right, so it is feet. So, but this is going to be some distance, 6,000, so a mile plus from some geodetic marker, presumably, and then just 42 feet above sea level or 27 feet there. So if we say define graphically, then we don't have to worry about the fact that it's going to be a mile away from that. We say here, and I'll just say it's 0 here, but say okay. We can see there's something being placed as a preview. I click on it, and we can see here's the points that it created. We'll just take a look in 3D at the whole thing. Now I'm looking at a top view here. So let me first of all, here is your mesh that you did. We can see the grid of points there. So it does bring it in, you know, I mean, pretty instantly. which is nice. And then right now it's set. I brought it in and placed it so that the blue line was at the project 0, but that places everything 72 feet above sea level. So if this data point is, so I would probably want to say that this point here would be in relationship to the sea level would be 0. Let's see, sea level. I might have to open it up here and say that it's to sea level. The top blue line is going to be at 0 to sea level, and then we have these points above that there. And let's see, that's the thickness of it. Let's just say 10 feet. I just want to see what this does. This now has set that the blue line is at sea level. I made it 10 feet thick plus whatever that, whatever the points are going. Now, this is the, if you do end up with this, and it could be very, very thick, then you may be able to go and change the thickness of this. Let's see, can we do this? No, it's not doing it here, but I think we can say that the thickness, instead of being 10 feet, let me just do minus 50 feet. Now, what is that I'm attempting to do? I want this bottom to come up here. And the problem is I took it too high because it's actually not even 72 feet high. Let's see, minus 30 feet. Will it allow me to minus 20? There we go. Okay, so what I did, this is set at sea level. These points are based on the survey. And I said, make the bottom of the actual platform, 20 feet above the above that, so that we don't have this thickness, because now it looks pretty reasonable as opposed to potentially being super tall. All right, so that's how you bring in a survey with the XYZ and some of the options for placing it. You do probably want to say that that the base of that is at 0 in relationship to sea level would be the most common thing, because then these points will elevate. So if I press down on this point, we can see that its height is 20 feet. Let's see this. Let's see, this is, if I change the Z height here. So what is this? This is 42.5. If I go to this one, it's 41.3 and whatever. So these are all the survey points. 36.
If I may, Eric,
Yeah.
this is the issue I was hoping to discuss with you. If you look at that, it looks like the contour is going in what seems like a mirrored elevation. So
Okay, so did I mess things up when I changed the?
no, I had the same issue.
Okay.
If you look at the survey, if you want to take the time to open my file, you'll see the survey. And, it shows the elevations on.
So these are going from 42, lowest point, 27, 25. So 25 is the lowest point, highest point is 42. That's what it looks like. So if I measure this and I say, what is the Z height of this? Z coordinate minus 39. Okay, so that's minus 39 in relationship to probably the first floor. So if we take 72 feet minus 39 is what, 32 feet. Here, this is probably the low point, which would be the 25 feet or something like that. So this is 25 feet. It's 45 feet below the story. So let me go back to the first floor, and it might make more sense when we're looking at it on the floor level here. So I think at this point, yeah, it says 26 feet and 5/8 to sea level. If I go up to this point, and say measure, change that, that's 37.9. And
That's,
this,
if I may, that's the thing. That corner at the top right should be the lowest point of the site.
well, maybe this has to be rotated around in, in terms of its orientation, because this is going up to 42, which is what I expected was the top point. So if we look back at that, the data that we had here, 42 and these 42, 43, these are the highest points on the in the survey. And it does match what we're seeing, in when we're selecting points here.
Could you open the PLN file?
All right, so let's see in Slack. Here's the PLN. What version of ArchiCAD are you in?
25.
All right, so we'll just download this. Okay, so the file import was amazingly easy. The thing is the mesh contour slopes from back to front, site sloping to the right rear corner. So it might have to be rotated around or something like that is my guess.
Yeah, I looked at that, but I think when you see the elevation markers points, you'll see what I'm.
All right, so I'll just save this just as a, in case I want to look at it again. So this is ArchiCAD user demo, and this is May 2022 here. Okay, and let's go and open your file. So we are at the 2-hour mark. I will just continue in this session here for a few more minutes just to give continuity. But then I'll finish up the public ArchiCAD user meeting, and we'll switch over to the private one for the ArchiCAD coaching program members. I want to thank you all for joining me today. We've still got 45 people on the call, and we'll go for another 5 minutes right now. Hopefully, just a quick review of this particular mesh situation. If you'd like to get my help in future, you can always contact me through support@bobrow.com, and be my pleasure to help you get the most out of ArchiCAD. So here we're going to see then from Will's file here. Okay, so we have the site. Okay, it's taking a moment to draw update here. Okay, let me just go back to the site. Okay, so
the top right would be the lowest point as indicated by the survey elevation markers.
Okay, so this is the mesh that you imported. Now, when I imported the mesh, it was rotated. So I'm not sure why mine was rotated. Obviously, yours was not. So if we're looking at, so these point numbers here, are they coming from something else then?
That was from the surveyor's PDF.
So do we have a trace and reference? I'll turn trace and reference off. That's not trace and reference. So what are we seeing here? So this number and this marker here, site property line, did you just import a DWG?
Yes.
Well,
yes, can you hear me?
now I can, yeah. For a moment I didn't.
Yeah.
All right, so this data here, these numbers here, look like sample points that should, I would think, correspond to the mesh.
They should coordinate, yes. So you can see that wrinkle in the back right, on the top right corner of our drawing would be the lowest point, but if you look at it in 3D,
Okay.
it seems to be reversed somehow.
Well, what if I just do something radical. I'm just going to rotate. Actually, first of all, let's look in 3D before I make any changes. So we'll go to 3D. Okay, and we need to have that layer. So we have custom layers. So should I turn on all on? Okay, so this is now buried. And
So where that little wrinkle is at the front really should be at the rear.
okay, so if this were rotated around 180 degrees, do you think it might make more sense?
No, I tried that, honestly.
Okay, well, let me just import this file again. We'll just see if you placed it graphically, right?
Yes.
Place mesh from surveyor's data. So I'm going to go to your cleaned for import, and I'm going to say put it in the original location here, and say it's in feet here, and I'll just leave the project 0 at 0 here, so we'll do that. All right, so you can see it turned in, it came in on an angle. Now, if I say fit in window, here it's up here. Now I can go grab this and move it. You know, it's a mesh element, and I can, you know, now fit in window, and there it is. So this, you placed it somewhere. You know, I don't know what you did, but this has to be aligned to, you know, your building context there. So let me just drag this a little bit closer, and let's just take a look in 3D at what we have. So it looks like this corner and that corner are what you have, but it could be rotated around. I don't know. But one thing is, you can see that when I said don't do it graphically, it brought it in some, you know, a different type of an arrangement.
Yes, I just rotated it to be parallel to the building.
Yeah, so if I rotate this around, you know, a different way, you know, so here, I'm guessing that might be the symmetrically opposite way. Let's just see what that. Yeah, because now we can see it's lower in the bottom left as opposed to, oops, as opposed to there. So I don't know what is what, but what is the high point of the survey? If we,
It's the front left corner, I believe.
so here's 38 on this corner, and 42. 32. And 26. So
And
this is the low point, that's the high point there.
That does compute with what the actual site looks like. You walk.
So this is the high point, that's the low point, and we want it to be reversed. So it could be that instead of being rotated, it should be mirrored. I don't know. I don't know why things would come in mirrored, but let's just do a quick check here. If I were to mirror this here, and of course, you know, then we still need to rotate it and orient it. But what is this? So now this is the high point, that's the low point. So, you know, if I were to drag this over, just sort of approximately there. And at least temporarily delete your mesh.
Good. That looks much more like what the site actually should.
All right, so I don't know why it would be mirrored, but obviously I'm not deforming the mesh. I'm simply mirroring its reference points. And I don't know why it would be, ArchiCAD would be interpreting things incorrectly, or if it was produced in a non-standard fashion. But that would be what I'd experiment with. So your mesh, obviously, well, no matter which way you rotate it, it's not gonna work. But a mirrored copy does seem like it could work.
I see that.
So I would check that.
Okay.
And given that you can, then whatever you have, so this is mirrored. And if I press down on this and say, what is the height at this point? This is 37 to sea level. This is 44 to sea level. It's 54 to sea level. So it's also, it isn't matching the numbers here, because these were going up to 42 and not nearly 54. So there may be also something, in terms of XY position. So this one, oh, you know what? It's bottom and topper. Let's just change the, let's just put this at 0 as a base to sea level here. Now, what is this in terms of height? Here's the 42. That matches.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, and this is 26. Yeah, so that matches.
Yeah, so
All right. So when you bring it in, well, for one thing, you just want to make sure that the top, that it's set as a reference, that the 3D, if we go back to the 3D view here, this is going to move down a little bit. And this blue line, that's the sea level here. And,
cool.
and so this is the 42 and that's the 26 or whatever that matches that. So I mirrored it. I'm assuming that it's a combination of mirror and rotation that's going to do it.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know why it would be mirrored, but I guess it seems like it's going to work.
Yes, it does. I appreciate that, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, so so Doug Muir says try flip vertically. So Doug, your line should still be open. No, it's not. Let me reopen your line. So Doug,
Well, basically, I said that before you mirrored it, and by flip, I meant mirror. So we were on the same track. Thank you.
okay, perfect. All right, so again, I don't know why, but it seems like a plausible thing and the numbers do match. So probably just having flipped it once, you just would just rotate it around.
All it takes is one tiny little binary switch and everything will flip.
Right, exactly.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. All right, so I guess we'll finish. So Stuart Lake says the reference data point could be to the right of the site. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I suppose I'm not quite sure how that would work. My mind is blanking on that. If you were measuring from a point, you'd still, but X and Y should still be, X always goes to the, whatever your right is positive, and, Y is, I mean, if you think about just an axis, you normally don't have things mirrored. You can have them rotated, but you normally don't have it. But Stuart, maybe there's some correspondence to the geodetic survey point, and I can imagine that would work, or that would be the cause. So thanks for the comment. All right, so we'll finish up. Thank you all for joining me. Please send me comments or additional questions through to support@bobrow.com. And for those of you who are in the ArchiCAD coaching program, I will take a 10-minute break and be available for additional questions. I know Nestor sent in at least one question, and we can take those, any follow-up questions there. So thank you all. Stay well, stay healthy.